Have you ever climbed a mountain and thought you've reached the top, only to get there and realize the real summit is still so far away? That moment when your heart sinks and you think, I thought I was done climbing. That's what I call a false peak. You did the work. You pushed yourself. You thought the hard part was over. And then you realize the journey is not finished. And that realization can be so incredibly discouraging. Today, we are talking about how to stay motivated when you hit a false peak in life. Because sometimes the hardest part of the journey is not starting, it's realizing you're not actually done yet. Welcome to the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast, where you master your mind and coach your own comeback. You are the hero, you are the guide, and you will learn to architect your life from the inside. I'm your host, Britannia Stowe, joined by my sister and co host, Annika Wilder. Enjoy the show. Okay, Annika, welcome back, co host.
Thank you.
Perfect
Thank you.
time to come back. We're talking false peaks.
Yeah, this is so good. We were talking a little bit off script or off camera just before this, and I'm excited to talk about it because this is a very relatable topic where you think you've accomplished things, you've done the work, and you're done, and you realize, oh, shoot, I'm just getting started, or there's another mountain to climb. And this is life, like if you do life right, you'll never be actually done.
Yes, actually, let's start there. That's a really good point. You think that you're going to be, like sipping coladas because, you've gone to college or you've gotten the job or life is going to be really good, but actually, you are constantly climbing another mountain because you should never be done doing the work. You should always be improving yourself. And when you do that, there's going to be more opportunities, and with more opportunities are more challenges.
Yeah, I feel like, Britannia, you've lived like 5 lives already.
Thank you for acknowledging that. I know, I feel 80 years old.
But you look like you're 20.
Thank you.
But really, like, let's talk about that though, because I have the privilege of knowing you my whole life, and your 20s looked very different than your 30s, and now you're reigning in a new decade, and that is already looking different, being a mom and your businesses and the directions you're taking with your book and your podcast. I mean, what was different about your 20s? Do you feel like you've hit false peaks in your 20s?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like I've hit false peaks throughout my life, but specifically in my 20s, moving, away from North Carolina and starting a new life in Utah, that I thought, okay, my life is going to be better now. And actually, things got worse. Things got worse because it was a different environment. I wasn't done changing. I wasn't done developing. There were variables that I didn't account for. And so even though I had this climb of moving across the United States and, further away from my older brother and my friends, I I felt like the work should be done and it wasn't. And then again in my 20s, when I finally had the courage to, break up with an abusive ex, and I thought, okay, now my life is going to be great. Or I graduated college and I was like, okay, now things are going to be happening for me. And that's what, a false peak is. In mountaineering, a false peak is when you climb what you appear to be the summit. Like you're like, all right, I see the end is in sight. That's my goal. And you put in the work and you get there. And this, you get there and you're like, okay, finally I can breathe. And yet you look around and realize that the climb is not done and it's maybe even steeper, right? So that the true peak is even further away. But that is because the peak has moved, right? You're no longer that same person. So, Annika, let me ask you the same question. In your 20s, did you hit any false peaks?
Oh, definitely. There's college in my 20s. I got married in my 20s, but I think the most obvious one, actually, I would say two are the most obvious ones, are when I got married, and I think, Disney and Hollywood is to blame because they never show after the wedding. They never show. They just say happily ever after.
So
And
of
so
course you think it's going to be happily ever after.
right. And so I think like, okay, we did it. We planned the wedding, which is a lot of work. We had the wedding, which was a lot of work, and it was amazing and it was beautiful. And we had the party, and then we're on our honeymoon and we're like, we did it. We're married. And then, day one, there's already tension and challenges, and we're like, wait, what's going on? Where's the happily ever after? And this is the
Yes.
new peak that you are now starting to climb. You had the peak of dating and engagement and marriage or the wedding, and you summited it, and now you are climbing a new mountain of marriage, which lasts the duration of your marriage and hopefully beyond.
Exactly. I remember even, thinking that same thing that we've been dating for 3.5 years. Like, of course, it's time for us to get married. And we've worked through so much and almost broke up and almost like decided this wasn't right. But we stayed in it and we learned how to communicate and learned our love languages. And, it's going to be great. And even, in our honeymoon, I remember us having a little squabble or having miscommunications. And I'm like, this can't be right. This is our honeymoon, you know? And
Yeah.
and so that's a false peak. Or, even with, starting businesses. Like I have started several businesses before the age of 40. And I, saw each one of those as a peak, as a summit. And I expected there to be ease afterwards, a downhill climb. But in fact, I'm in a position right now where I feel like I am climbing harder and I need more endurance than ever.
Or having a baby. This was a big eye opener for me. So you plan on having babies, and again, you think it's going to be this most amazing thing, and it's a 9 month journey of pregnancy, and then you have labor and delivery. And for me, they were wonderful natural births, and I'm so proud of it. It's the most empowering thing a woman could ever do. And then I thought, okay, I did it. I had the baby. Like I'm done.
Yeah.
And then you find out, oh, I got to take care of this thing now.
Yes. And I feel like, having a baby, especially because it isn't, just this, psychological, but it's also a physical and a spiritual and emotional. Like every layer of you has been climbing. And then you get this prize. You actually get this physical thing. And so, of course, it feels like you've reached the peak and everything should be easy. And you feel like it should be innate, right? Like
hmm
I know what my baby needs when he or she cries, and I know how to calm them down, and I know how to, navigate not getting sleep. But that is not the case.
No, none of us know really what we're doing. And I think that was a big eye opener for me. Like, I thought if I could have a good pregnancy and have a good labor and delivery, then I could, like, motherhood will just come naturally. And for me, it didn't. I had to learn. I had to read books. I had to consult my mom, my sisters, my husband, my friends, the internet of like how to take care of a little human, how to take care of myself with no sleep. And it was peak after peak after peak. And so this is just life, right? This is the ebbs and flows of life. I mean, it's the same thing with working out. I'm the biggest, how do I say this? I do this all the time where I will like run 3 miles. I'm like, hey, I did it. Like, I'm good for the week. Like, I'll
I
lose
never
10
have
pounds.
to work out again.
Yeah, exactly. And I do build muscle fairly quickly. And Dan, my husband, makes fun of me all the time because he will just be like, "Oh, babe, just do like a couple push-ups and then you'll be good. Your arms will be sculpted." And that's not how it works. That is not how it works. And once you reach a certain level, and you know this better than me because you're the workout queen, you're the fitness queen, you're a yoga instructor. I mean, you know that once you reach a certain peak in fitness, you have to start changing your routine because your body just gets used to it. Now your bar that was once here is now here. And if you
Mhm.
want to continue to build muscle, continue to overcome physical challenges, to lose weight, you have to mix things up. You can't just do the same thing year after year, right?
Yeah, and even within a year, within, a few months, your body can get used to a certain workout. And that's why cross training is so important. And so you're absolutely right. So what are, we talked about having a baby, getting married, and working out. What are some other examples of a false peak in life?
Well, I mean, like starting a business or just honestly anything that you start that you're working towards a destination and you think you get to the destination only to find out there is more to come. And this is another one. I mean, there's so many examples, but another one for me is I thought I had healed myself. I thought I had done all the work.
Mm.
I thought, okay, I've done energy work, I've done therapy, I've done yoga, I've done meditation, I've changed my mindset, I've changed my body. Like I have healed myself, only to find that healing comes in layers. And when you actually heal a big part of you, multiple other parts of you are revealed, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do.
Yeah, I think of a Russian nesting doll that you like finally you've cracked the shell, you've relieved yourself of this part that no longer belongs to you, maybe you've even healed generational trauma, like huge, and so you're like, oh, okay, and you can like open up the doll and you're like, there will be my prize, like there will be the gold or the reward or whatever that is in comparison to your healing, and then you notice there's another doll and you're
Hmm.
like, okay, but how do I open this one now? How do I heal this part of me? And you could not see it until you healed that one part. So you can't, I mean, yes, it builds, like you build endurance when you're climbing a mountain or you're working out, but it's a new puzzle to solve.
Same thing with physical health too, not just emotional, spiritual, mental health. This is physical health. If you ever go to a naturopath and they're looking at your blood, what's really cool about dark blood analysis is they only see what needs to be seen right now. Basically, your body is communicating what you need to work on right now. So then you heal that part. Maybe it's a leaky gut, or maybe you have parasites, or maybe you have like overgrowth of yeast or something like bacteria or whatever it is. You work on that, and then you're like, okay, I got rid of the parasites, and you go back to your naturopath and like, okay, great. Now your liver is struggling here. Now your adrenals are struggling. Let's work on that. And you go, oh, I thought if I just got rid of the parasites, I'll be fine. But it will continue to reveal itself, and then you get rid of all the bad stuff, and then the next thing you know it, your naturopath is saying you need to not eat fruit or vegetables for a while because you have a mold issue. And you thought, well, why didn't you tell me I had a mold issue? Why didn't you tell me I had mold in my body? You've been looking at my blood for over a year. And the naturopath says, because it comes in layers. We have to focus on one thing at a time. And I could not see it. There are certain things that hide in your body and disguise itself in your body physically if you look at it at a cellular level, and you won't see it. It won't be revealed until you work on the first things first.
So how can we, compare this to valleys? Because I think some people hear some of this and go, "Oh my gosh, like this sounds like a valley. This sounds like instead of a false peak, I'm going down. Maybe I'm in a hole. Maybe I'm hitting rock bottom." So, maybe we can also talk about some examples of valleys because, a false peak and a valley is not the same. A false peak is you hit these summits on your climb up as you're healing, as you're doing the work. Well, a valley is completely different.
Yeah, so a peak is a high point, a valley is a low point. So all the examples we gave were good things: having a baby, marriage, starting a business, healing yourself. These are all good things. You're at the top only to realize there's more to keep climbing. But a valley are things that happen that are low points. This could be losing a job, a divorce, an illness, a financial struggle, hitting rock bottom of any kind, which we do all the time because, like I said, it ebbs and flows. And so we'll hit these peaks only to think we need to keep peaking, and then we hit these lows in order to climb back up. So valleys can be way more painful, way more obvious, and everybody has many, many, many of these. And it doesn't mean you're at the bottom. This is all part of climbing the mountain. This is part, like, think of a mountain range. You climb one and you go down, you're going to climb up another. But your trajectory, the goal is to always be climbing up, even if you're going down a little bit along the way.
Yeah, it's like the idea of like, three steps, back so that you can take four steps forward. But, emotionally, this can be really confusing because with a false peak, you're expecting relief, right? It's that balance between expectations and reality. And instead, more effort is required, more questions need to be asked. And so, this gap between expectation and reality is what makes a false peak so difficult and so discouraging.
Yeah, because everyone knows if you get a divorce or you lose your job or have financial struggle of some way, everyone knows you're going to be down and out for a little bit. You're going to be struggling. You're going to be sad. You're going to work your way up out of this hole that you're in. But a false peak is discouraging in a different way because it's not expected. You climb up to the top hoping, okay, I did it, only to realize there's more to do. And so if you tell yourself, like, once I get a promotion, once I start a business, once I buy a house, once we have a baby. It's basically this false belief system that you can't have X until X happens, and it's always chasing the other side. The grass is greener on the other side. It never actually works because once you're on the other side, you're going to look behind you and say, actually, the grass was greener on that side.
Yeah, or you notice the weeds on this side. Maybe it was green, but it's because it was covered in weeds. Like you see something else that you didn't see before. And
Mhm.
so, it's discouraging because you've mapped out your resources. You planned to cross this bridge to get to the other side. You have, planned how much energy, money, or time will be invested. And you thought you got to rest. And you should rest. There should be pit stops. If you cross that bridge and make it to the other side, have a picnic. Okay. Celebrate a little bit that you got there, but that doesn't mean you stay there. You have to
Mhm.
keep going because the work continues. And sometimes I feel like it's harder when you've actually reached that goal, when you have gotten married, when you've gotten that promotion, than rock bottom, to be quite honest, because you're like, when you're at rock bottom, when you're in a valley, you're like, there's nowhere to go but up. And you celebrate every step. But when you're at a false peak, I feel like it takes even more energy and even more motivation to keep going forward because you're like, I'm tired. Like, how long do I have to be,
Mhm.
motivated for before I can have what I'm looking for?
And I'm so excited to reframe this because I think the goal here is thinking about things in long term instead of short term. And so, like, a marathon is long term, but you're going to tell yourself along the way, just get to the stop sign, just get to the tree, just get to the top of the hill. But you're going to be running for a couple hours. Some of us it'll be like 8 hours. So like this is going to be a long game, and life is a long game. You're not going to be done very quickly. I mean, if you are, 40 years old, you still have 40 more years to live, maybe even more, maybe 60 years if you live to 100. Like this is a long game. It's not a short game.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And so each of these, peaks can be your checkpoint, a moment where you stop and ask, what have I learned? You did have to go through a lot when you're dating someone, when you're engaged, when you're planning a wedding. You probably learned a lot about your spouse. That doesn't mean you've learned everything, but you've learned a lot, and recognize that and see how you can apply that. Or where do I need to adjust? Maybe it's thinking that you can read minds because you're married now, right? Go, actually, we still have to communicate. And then, ask yourself, do I want to keep climbing this same mountain? We talked about divorce too. So maybe you're married with someone for a while and you realize this is not the person I'm meant to be with. And that could be the same with starting a business. That could be the same with, working a career. I was in a career in pharmacy for almost 20 years and I jumped from summit to summit and climbed peak to peak and finally realized this was not the space I was supposed to be in. And so I took one of those peaks and allowed myself to have that pit stop and to evaluate, is this the mountain I want to climb or do I need to change my route?
Exactly. And I think staying motivated after a false peak is one of the hardest things. And I would love to hear what you would tell me because I don't think I talked about this, but my first job, I basically cut plastic. I worked for like a cell phone cover company. Like it was those plastic covers you put on your screens. And all day I'm using like an X-Acto knife and I'm cutting these out and I'm packaging them. And I would go through it so fast. And I lived in La La Land. I know this now because like I got paid to work 8 hours, but I thought if I finished this stack of papers, plastic things that I needed to cut, then maybe I can go home. And I don't know why I thought this, but I would go through it so fast. I'd package them and everyone's like, "Oh, you're so great." And I would get done like halfway through the day with this huge stack. And I'm like, "Whew, I'm done." And I would sit back in my chair, and then my boss came with a whole nother stack. And I was like, "Oh gosh, like this is grueling." Like it was the most monotonous job ever. And so how could I have stayed motivated instead of having a false expectation that I can be done with my day just because I finished the work fast?
Yeah, I mean, this is so relevant because I think a lot of people look at life that way. Is if I, hustle, if I don't sleep, if I maybe neglect my health, I can work on my health later. If I can hurry up and move very fast, then all of a sudden I'll be there faster. But you have to reset the timeline. So the timeline is not what you imagined. You thought if I got the stack done that I would be done in 5 hours versus 8, but you forgot that the journey is 8 hours a day, right? So allow yourself to, the problem isn't always the goal, right? It's the journey. So allow success to take a little bit longer than expected. And it does, right? Anyone who's accomplished anything can acknowledge that it takes a little bit longer to get what you want. Start a business, have financial success, maybe find your partner. So reset the clock, not the dream. Allow yourself to dream big. Allow yourself to dream even bigger than you could have ever imagined because you deserve all that and more. But release the pressure of the timeline because it is a marathon. I would also add take a strategic pit stop. We did a whole episode on pit stops. It's like racing cars. A pit stop doesn't mean the race is over. In fact, you have to take pit stops in Formula One so that you can keep going. And those who take a strategic pit stop often win the race. This allows you to refuel, to adjust, to assess, and continue. Resetting is not quitting. Annika, what else can we tell our listeners to do after they have reevaluated the timeline, take a pit stop? What else can they do?
Well, I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but when you're on a marathon, so now that you're thinking you have a more realistic timeline, like this is going to be a lot longer because life is a lot longer, then let's focus just on the next step because sometimes it is overwhelming to look at Mount Everest and go, how am I ever going to get up there? But if you're thinking, I'm just going to climb to that rock, and then once you get to that rock, worry about your next step then. If you worry about too much, it actually creates a lot of anxiety. It can feel extremely overwhelming. And instead, keep focusing on just the what are those called? Like on ladder? Are they like
The the
rungs?
rungs, yeah, the
Rungs?
rungs of the ladder.
Yeah, like one rung at a time. Because motivation will then return because you're not overwhelmed with this big project. Same thing with like cleaning your house. Have you ever told your brain, I need to clean the whole house, and you immediately go lay down or read a book or scroll?
Yes. 100% happens every time. Every time I look at everything I have to do, I do nothing.
Exactly. It's too much because your body's like, what do you mean clean the whole house? Does that mean like the baseboards and underneath the oven and underneath the fridge? Like, what does that mean? So instead, you tell your brain the next step. Just go put the cups in the dishwasher. Just focus on the cups. And then once you're doing your cups, your hands are already wet. Like, okay, now I'm going to do the plates. Now I'm going to do the silverware. Well, might as well start the dishwasher. Okay,
Mhm.
now the dishwasher's done. Okay, now I'm going to do the countertops. It's one step at a time. It's so much easier to handle the next step versus a huge mountain, a huge project. Your brain wasn't meant to store information, it's meant to process information. And when you give it little steps along the way, it's so much easier to handle.
Yeah, absolutely. And accept that mastery takes multiple peaks. So it's rarely one summit. I don't know anyone who has, climbed one mountain and called it good. Every successful entrepreneur, everyone who's had a great career or successful marriage or has competed in physique competitions have talked about each of these peaks. It's a series of peaks. It's a series of dots that you're connecting. And each time you reach one, you gain a broader perspective and you're able to climb the very next one. I was thinking about coding. So there's this big like push with like AI and the ability to like code and make your own apps and build your own websites. And if you like sat down and didn't know anything about AI and thought, I'm going to build this app, I'm going to build this business, you're not going to do it. But maybe you just learn a new program, you research one program, you take one class, one seminar, right? So knowing that it takes those steps will help relieve that pressure and give yourself some grace. Please. You have never done this before. You've never done this journey. You've never been this person, this version of you at this place at this time. So release yourself of the expectation of this fictitious, timeline that your life is only supposed to be 12 chapters. Who said? You're in the middle of your story. Enjoy the fact that it's not all written, not yet.
Hmm. So how do we coach ourselves, Britannia? Like, I mean, we've kind of given hints of how to reframe some of these perceptions, these false peak ideas, but how do we coach ourselves?
Yeah, so if any of this is resonating with you, where you are in your life, then I encourage you to ask yourself some of these reflective questions. First ask, where maybe am I facing a false peak? Where am I experiencing a false peak in my life? Then ask yourself, what expectation did I have about this stage of my journey? And that's huge. That's huge. Even just stopping there and realizing that you had expectations that weren't being met and go, oh, this is why I'm feeling defeated, is my expectations and my reality have not aligned. And then ask yourself, well, what have I climbed? Or what have I gained from my climb thus far? When we talk about it all the time, measuring yourself against the gain instead of the gap, how far you've come instead of how far you have to go. And then what adjustments do I need to make for that next stage? Knowing that maybe it is a career change, maybe it is a new relationship, but ask yourself what adjustments you can make where you can take control because there's a lot that you can't. And then what are the small steps, even if it's just one thing that you can do today? If it is, looking for a new partner, maybe it's going on the dating apps. If it is starting a new career, maybe it's taking a class. So just something small that you can bite off within the next week. And remember, when you're, hitting this false peak, you're not starting over. You are just continuing the climb. It really is a part of our journey to hit peak after peak after peak.
This is so good. And this is something to remember too, to first of all, stop lying to yourself that your 20s was your peak. Your, like, you could say, oh, I was at the peak, my peak fitness at 25, and it was downhill from there. Or once I hit 40, my health went downhill from there. Like, stop lying to yourself that your peaks in the past can never be outdone. Like there can be
Mm.
another peak coming for you. Why not be more fit and healthier in your 50s, 60s than you were in your 30s or 20s? Like, why not be more successful? Why not be better looking? Why not improve yourself? Like, why hold yourself back having the assumption that your false peaks in the past were your only peaks or the height of your life? It's a lie, and stop doing that.
I love that you called that out because I think of several people who've talked about like high school being the best years of their life. And, they peaked in high school, right? But I think it's because they've chosen to claim that as their highest peak, as their Everest, as the hardest thing they've ever done. So, of course, it will be your highest peak because that is the reality you've accepted. But again, your thoughts become your beliefs, and your beliefs will help guide you with every peak that you climb. So if you're feeling discouraged because you haven't arrived yet, take a breath, look around. You're not in a valley. You're still on the mountain. You're climbing, and you've climbed higher than you've ever thought was possible. Take a moment and take a look out. View what you've accomplished. See the view from the summit and allow yourself to enjoy and to celebrate how far you've come. It is always worth that final stretch. So keep climbing one step at a time. This has been another episode of the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, subscribe and share the love. And remember the teachings of Lao Tzu. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Until next time, trust yourself. Take the wisdom, take the breath, and take the next step.